Hello and good morning. This is Theolyn. I'm recording, I think it's episode 4 of the Bridge of Stars series. And I'm really enjoying these because every evening when I go to bed, I'm thinking, what's going to unfold tomorrow? And then when I go for my meditation, I wonder, what is going to be the angel script symbol for today? The character from the alphabet, the writing of the angel's alphabet. And so I'm always on a little quest for myself and for you. And if you're enjoying these, I'm going to keep rolling with them just as long as it feels right. And I invite you to subscribe, press the bell so you get notified. And I also invite you to share with your friends. So, the Hebrew letter that came to me when I was meditating, because in my meditation room, I have a pack of cards, which is not the angel script, but is just a series of Hebrew letters. So I go to that first, and then I come out and I find the angel script character that matches. Okay, because all the characters in the angel script are named after Hebrew letters. So today we have Tor, T-A, here he comes, there we are, community. And this character is, you can see it's got 8 orbs of light on it. And it's the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And it's also has some similarities to the first letter because in the angel script, the first letter, Aleph, also has 8 orbs of light. So there's a multiplicity of energies going on in the first one, Aleph, and the last one, here we are, Tor, which is about community. And of course, right at this time in our collective history, the issue of community and communion with people is a really big deal. And everyone is coming together in all kinds of ways that perhaps they hadn't got round to before, or they hadn't thought of before, or they felt too separate from other people. And then, of course, we have the concept of social media, which was previously being used and still is being used, of course, for some things that are fairly trivial in a way, fun, but now it's much more meaningful to use the media and the technology that we've got to create communities or to give a sense of community where we already had one, but we are being kept apart. Like, for example, religious services are being broadcast using technology because people can't gather in the synagogues or the churches or the mosques or the temples, whatever. So this notion of community is a really key issue for us. And it brings together people of very disparate ideologies, people who perhaps disagree on various topics, especially religious topics, but also political topics. And you hear the politicians saying, we have to sort this in a way that goes beyond ideology. So the community becomes the key issue, and the protection and the safety of vulnerable people in the community, and the willingness of people in the community who have got more wealth to be distributors of that wealth. That we're all being challenged in all those different directions. How do we hold a sense of community together and bring people together in a way that perhaps where they had felt separate before, or where circumstances like this virus are forcing people to realise how valuable community is, and how can we do it under these circumstances. So community, 8 orbs of light there, and that number 8 will be of interest to us in a moment. Now, I'm just going to say something quickly astrological, because the sun has just recently moved into the sign of Taurus. Right? The new moon, which is happening kind of about now, is in the sign of Taurus. That always happens because the new moon's always in the same sign that the sun is in. Right? The moon is very happy in the sign of Taurus. It's a comfy place for the moon. And it's comfy in the way of, sofas and hot chocolate and cozy kind of things like that, snuggling up kind of feeling. Now, this is very interesting because when you get a new moon, it tends to give you a flavour for the few weeks ahead until we come into a new moon. So we have this flavour of Taurus from the sun and from the new moon. Now, the planet, or the god or goddess who rules the sign of Taurus is Venus. And I was talking about Venus just yesterday. So Venus is up in the sky, very visible as the evening star at the moment. You may know, if you know anything astronomical at all, you may know that Venus becomes evening star, then she disappears, and then she arises again as the morning star. But she goes through that cycle, and sometimes you can't see her because she's too close to the sun. So right now, Venus is in the sign of Gemini, and she's going to be in that sign for quite a few weeks. I can't tell you the exact date off the top of my head, but it's probably into July even, because she goes into Gemini and then she goes into retrograde. You've probably heard of retrogrades because a lot of people know about Mercury going retrograde. So Venus is going to be hanging out in the sign of Gemini for quite a long time. So Venus, of course, has always been associated with kind of sex and love and again with comfy things like the sign of Taurus that she rules. So in the sign of Gemini, the ancient Greek astrologers thought she wasn't very happy in the sign of Gemini because Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is all about kind of head stuff, communication, it's more intellectual, whereas Venus has always been regarded as more sensual, right? And the sensual and the intellectual don't tend to marry up very well. But we have an advantage here for Venus. Even if she's not quite cosy in Gemini, we have an advantage because we have Taurus. Her sign is strong. Now, Venus could also in Gemini be really good for loving Venus. Gemini communications, loving communications. And that's what we need to keep offering to each other, loving communications. And also Mercury would govern something like the technology that we use, the telephones, the internet, all that techie stuff would be governed by Mercury. So Venus, in order to keep things cozy, can make good use during this time of all that techie stuff. And she can also make use of the playfulness of Mercury. Because although Mercury is kind of mind stuff and intellectual, there's also this element of playfulness. So, get out the board games, get out the jigsaw puzzles. I've got a daughter who's very keen on jigsaw puzzles, and she told me that she was spending some of her time doing jigsaw puzzles with her wife. So there we have Venus. So yesterday I was talking to you about the role of going into the underworld. Previous day it was Baba Yaga going, the young lady going into the woods, going to the darkness. And then yesterday's story was about Persephone going into the underworld. Now there's a very ancient story connected with Venus about the goddess going into the underworld, and it's a very, very dark story. So this story goes back to the time of the Babylonian, Assyrian, Sumerian mythologies, in the days when the goddess we associate with the planet Venus was called Inanna. Later she became called Ishtar, then Astarte, and then the Greeks called her Aphrodite, and then she's also Venus. So Inanna, the story of Inanna, is a very ancient Mesopotamian myth, and we don't know quite how old it is. I mean, the goddess Inanna's history may go back 6,000 years. Well, the story about Ishtar goes a bit like this. She's always regarded as being rather impetuous. She's young and impetuous, and she's a bit naughty because she goes around taking attributes from other gods. She's after stuff all the time. She's quite greedy in a way. She wants knowledge, which she can get from some of the other gods, and she wants to take possession or be in control of a lot of stuff. At one point, she steals what are called the May, and the May are is the ancient wisdom which was given by visitors, perhaps visitors from other stars, many generations before the Mesopotamians, and these are called the May, the wisdom, the accumulated knowledge that allows humans to build their civilization. So she steals that at one point. But the dark version of her story is that she decides that she wants to go in the underworld. She feels like she's a big cheese in heaven, but she wants to know about the underworld. The underworld, however, is ruled by her older sister, Ereshkigal. Now, Ereshkigal is even darker character than Baba Yaga. She's really hefty. And if you rub her up the wrong way, you'll get into real serious trouble. And that's what happens to Inanna. She goes down into a place where she's not been invited. As she goes down, she's wearing all her regalia. She thinks she's a great princess, or even moving towards being a queen. And she's got jewellery, she's got clothes, beautiful clothes. But as she gets into the underworld, she is stopped along the route on 7 occasions at 7 gates. And at each of those gates, something is taken from her, or she has to give it up. So she has to give up her jewellery, her clothes, and so on and so forth. And by the time she gets to meet Ereshkigal, she has nothing. She's completely stripped. She's quite naked, vulnerable. And Ereshkigal is not nice to her. Ereshkigal hangs her up in an iron cage. There's Inanna, no clothes, suffering. Not at all friendly, this sister. So while she's hanging there, she's moaning and wailing, but eventually, due to her suffering, she actually dies. So, back in the heavenly realms, her friends and her maid are running around asking the other gods to come and help. Then particularly, they go to Enki, who's a big cheese, and Enki eventually, because he feels he can't intervene himself, because it's Ereshkigal's land, you see. So Enki creates 2 little spirits, and these spirits are androgynous. And that means that they don't challenge anybody else on a one-to-one basis, because they like shapeshifters almost. And in that sense, they are not unlike Mercury, Hermes, going into the underworld to rescue Persephone. So these 2 little spirits wheedle their way in, invisibly almost, into the underworld. And they go to Ereshkigal and beg for the body. And Ereshkigal's not very happy herself. She's grieving because she's actually in labour. She's having a horrible time, and that's what she was taking her revenge on the sister. But the little spirits sit with her and they say, oh, you poor thing, we understand, we know you're suffering. And because Ereshkigal receives this unconditional compassion for her dark sorrow, she is prepared to give up Inanna, and the little spirits sprinkle Inanna with the water of life, and she is brought back to life, and they take her up again. And because Inanna has met the darkness, surrendered everything, including her life, Inanna gets what's called the shagura, which is a triple crown with horns on it, and a big star. And the shagura is a real recognition of the power of the Queen, who's now the Queen of Heaven. She was already pretty funky up there, but she was demoted when she goes into the underworld. She loses everything, she surrenders everything, or it's actually taken from her. I don't think she has any choice to surrender. And then there's another bit of the story, because she goes back to her husband called Dumuzi, and Ereshkigal is saying, actually, I actually want something in exchange. And Inanna sees that Dumuzi has been living it up while she wasn't there, so she says, you can have my husband. That's another part of the story. But the point of this tale, unlike the other tales that I've been talking about, is this thing of surrendering what you think are important to you, what things are important to you. Your jewellery, your clothes, it's very feminine, all those things that women usually feel are really significant to their identity, and they become not important in the face of death. They become something that is a weight on you, something that in some senses, in order to learn something, to become greater, you don't steal it, you go into it, and you are asked to be given the wisdom. And that's what Inanna, we can see that Inanna gets that. So we have those different stories, and they keep repeating themselves. Somebody goes into some kind of challenging situation, it's very dark, it's very kind of like unknown. It's so unknown that there can be no plan about how to get out of it. And that's the kind of situation that we could see ourselves being in. And yet somehow we know that there's some kind of underlying plan. If we can trust that, go back and think about the story, the famous metaphor of the butterfly that comes out of the chrysalis. The caterpillar creates the chrysalis and it goes into mush. We're in mush. Our bridge is pretty mushy. But while we're walking across the bridge, while we're moving across the bridge, and we don't even know how long it is or what's on the other side, we can also be aware that there's some kind of plot here. Even if we don't understand it all, there's some kind of plot, because part of us knows there's going to be a butterfly. So that's what I've got for you today about a famous myth. Oh, and by the way, I meant to just move my thing down so you can see here that I've got a little necklet, which is based on Inanna Ishtar there, that I thought I would wear for today. So, Bridge of Stars. I opened Bridge of Stars, and actually I'd got the marker in from the poem I found yesterday. The prayer I found yesterday, the Icelandic prayer about the owl and the keenness of the owl's sight when he's in the dark. And as I opened it and I was going to find another page, I happened to see, just on the other side, signposts. Speech and custom here are strange to me. Even the signposts of the heart are in different tongues, even in different alphabets, yet they all point the same way. I cannot lose myself. And that is described as being a modern meditation from Hong Kong in China. So I bid you farewell. Stay joyful. Many blessings.